The Gemara tells us, increases daf tes, daf ches, daf tes. The Gemara talks about the concept of gerus. What is required for conversion, for a Gentile converting to Judaism, a non-Jew converting to Judaism? What is the gerus? What does the conversion process entail? The Gemara tells us, Kochem, we learn it out from Matan Torah, we learn it out that basically we need milah, if you're a male, circumcision, tavila, immersion in the mikveh, and as well, we need a karban. You have to bring our sacrifice. Of course, we'll get into a discussion later where does a basin fit in, whether you need Kabbalah's mitzvahs, those are all part of the equation. But the Gemara singles out, increases three things you need: milah, tefillah, and karban. So the Gemara has the Gemara know that you need a karban. So it quotes the pasuk. It quotes the pasuk. So the Gemara wants to know. So Bishrom, milah, and tefillah, you could do any time, during any generation. But karban, when there's no Beis HaMikdash, we don't bring a karban. So post-temple, are we permitted to accept converts, gerim, because where is the karbanos? Even though in theory, maybe according to the Rambam, that it's Kedushas HaMikdash, but practically speaking, we don't bring karbanos today. So how can we accept a ger today? Well, we see we do. So how is it? The Gemara says, based on the pasuk with Doro Sechem, it says we accept gerim for all future generations. The Gemara learns out that even when you don't have a Beis HaMikdash, so therefore one does not need a karban. So that's the conclusion of the Gemara based on the pasuk of Bisman Hazeh, post-temple, that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, we're still permitted to accept gerim because based on the pasuk of Doro Sechem. So the Gemara, however, quotes a brisa. The Gemara increases that says, however, a ger, a convert who converts today, must designate money for a karban to be offered when the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt. When the Mashiach comes and the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, so then the ger has to bring a karban. So right now, when he converts, he or she should designate money, to bring a karban later on. However, we don't do that today. I never seen a ger designating money for a Beis HaMikdash. That's because the Gemara continues and says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted that we should discontinue the practice. We no longer should have a convert designate money to bring to the karban, because the concern is it might end up being running from the pan to the fire. You're going to cause a bigger harm. That the ger might violate me'ilah behektish, not using the funds properly, that you might inadvertently use funds that are designated for holy purposes and use it for personal use it for davachom. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai discontinued the practice. So even though the Gemara says a ger has to bring a karban, but post Beis HaMikdash, because based on the pasuk L'Doro Sechem, he doesn't have to bring it. Yet Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Gemara quotes the Brisa, it says, but he has to put aside money, so later on when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, he can do it. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai discontinued that practice. So although everyone agrees Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai decreed that discontinued the practice and says a ger no longer designates money for a karban, nevertheless, af al pi kein, the Rambam codifies the halacha that all converts who convert after the temple post Korban Abayis will be obligated to bring a karban when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt. Even though it's true we don't tell a ger today to take money is because the concern of me'ilah behektish, but when the basis hamikdash will be built speedily in our day, so then so if the Beis HaMikdash will be built tomorrow, all Gerim then would have to go ahead and bring a carbon. That's the opinion of the Rambam. And as the Gemara tells us in Krisos and Daf Chesam and Beis, a ger, when there was a Beis HaMikdash, so when he had to bring a carbon, a ger was not permitted to eat kachim, or for that matter, he couldn't marry a Jew, a Bas Yisrael, until he brought the carbon. So post Beis HaMikdash, we wait till he could bring the money later. But when Bisman Beis HaMikdash Kayim, when he had to bring a carbon, he didn't become a complete Jew, apparently, based on the Gemara in Krisos, until after he brought the carbon, because he couldn't, even if he did Mila and Tvila, he still wasn't permitted to eat kachim, and he wasn't permitted to marry a Bas Yisrael. So comes along the Avnei Nezer. The Avnei Nezer points out, he raises the question whether, based on this, whether a ger who converts today, so what about a ger that converts today and then the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt? Is he permitted to partake in kachim when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt? So the Avnei Nezer says, he raises that question. Do I say that since the Rambam Paskins that he's going to have to bring a carbon when the Beis HaMikdash is up, so do I say, since Bisman Beis HaMikdash Kayim, before he brought a carbon, he couldn't marry a Bas Yisrael, and he couldn't eat kachim, the Avnei Nezer raised, what about eating kachim? When he converted now, and now the Beis HaMikdash is up. So is he permitted to eat kachim before he brings a carbon or not? Or if he doesn't bring a carbon? So the Avnei Nezer wants to conclude from the fact that we permit him to marry a Bas Yisrael, and therefore we see Bisman Hazeh doing a Mila and Tefillah achieves a full-fledged Gerus. Therefore we assume he could eat, and therefore we permit him to eat the kachim. And similarly he says that when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, and a ger would be permitted to eat kachim even prior to bringing a carbon, even though they're still going to have a mitzvah to offer a carbon when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, but failure to do so will not prevent him from eating kachim, or we'll see, or perhaps marrying a Bas Yisrael. So, but that's the Avnei Nezer. The fact today we assume it's considered, we permitted him to marry a Bas Yisrael even without the carbon. So he says even when the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, nevertheless it's still a din lechatchila, but it's not ma'akev. And the Zeicher Yitzchak seems to disagree with the Avnei Nezer. He quotes Tosfos over here in Krisos, and he says Tosfos indicates the opposite of the Avnei Nezer. That Tosfos says that when B'mheira Yibana Beis HaMikdash, when the Beis HaMikdash is built, Gerim will be required to bring a carbon to complete their Gerus. And therefore, it's Mashaf and Tosfos, the Zeicher Yitzchak says, that not only will the ger be prohibited from eating kachim until he brings the carbon, he'll even be prohibited from marrying a Bas Yisrael. And even though today a ger who converts can marry a Bas Yisrael, this will be revoked when the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, and he'll be required to bring a carbon to permit him to marry a Bas Yisrael. So the Avnei Nezer says that no, on both accounts, he still mutter and kachim and a Bas Yisrael, and he just brings a carbon lechatchila. The ger, the Zeicher Yitzchak says based on Tosfos and Krisos Daf Ches, said no, it's liikuva. One would not be permitted to marry a Bas Yisrael or eat kachim until they bring a carbon. So yesh lachkor is a shaila in the Achronim. What about someone who already is married then? Would they be permitted to their wife until they bring a carbon or not? So either way, that's a discussion we'll see in the Achronim. But to summarize, we spoke about the three things required that the Gemara tells us increases. Certainly during the Beis HaMikdash time, Mila, Tefillah, and bringing a karban. And how do we know that bringing a karban applies? How do we know that even though you can't bring a karban today, the gerus is still good? Based on the pasuk of Ledoro Sechem. So Gemara increases, quotes the Brisa that a ger has to put away money now when he converts in order that when the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, he'll bring a karban. Rav Yochanan and Zakkai discontinued that practice because of the problem of Me'ila Behektish. However, the Rambam codifies that when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, a ger is obligated in bringing a karban. And that's the question then, so Bisman, when Beis HaMikdash is Kayam, so would he be permitted to eat the kachim and marry a Bas Yisrael, things that weren't permitted Bisman Beis HaMikdash Kayam? So the Avnei Nezer says yes, and the fact that he's permitted today to marry a Bas Yisrael shows he has a full-fledged Kedusha, and hence he could marry a Bas Yisrael as well as the kachim. The Zecha Yitzchak isn't so sure, based on the Tosas increases, that he's Molda, that the fact that you can marry a Bas Yisrael today, because today you're a full-fledged Jew, but perhaps that's only Kolzman that it's not shayak to bring a karban, but maybe once it's shayak to bring a karban, then maybe bringing a karban is ma'akev, and hence a ger would not be able to eat the kachim or marry a Bas Yisrael until after he brings a karban. And that would be the question: would he have to divorce his wife or not live with his wife until he brings the karban? And it's a separate child in general. Even perhaps Bisman Beis HaMikdash Kayim, what role did bringing a karban play? Was that a din likuva, that without the karban you weren't Jewish? Or perhaps that was just more a din l'chadchila? That could tie into the shaila as well. We'll have to continue next time on the issue of the Seder HaGeirus. How does someone become a convert? How does a non-Jew become a Jew? We know there are Jews by birth, if you come from a Jewish mother, and there are Jews by choice. Someone chooses to convert. So how does it work? How could you become from a non-Jew to a Jew? So the Gemara in Krisis tells us in Daf Tes, it's patterned after Matan Torah. It's patterned after what was done at Har Sinai. That at Har Sinai, the Jewish people became full-fledged Gerim. In fact, that's why one of the reasons why we read Megillus Rus on the holiday of Shavuot. Rus became a Ger, and we learn out different halachas regarding some details of Gerus from Rus. But the point being is, it has that Har Sinai, we look back to Har Sinai as the example of Gerus. In fact, what was the status of the Jews' Kodem Matan Torah? So what happened? Clearly something happened in Har Sinai. There was a certain transformation that happened. They became full-fledged Yidden, Jews. The question is, what was the status before Matan Torah? So that's a discussion, the Bali Tosfos versus the Ramban. According to the Bali Tosfos, that basically, since the time of Avram Avinu, we were endowed with a certain level of Kedushas Yisrael. That whether it's the bris ben Absarim or some other bris, it was usually so you follow, actually the Tosfos says the opposite. Tosfos says that basically they were non-Jews up until Har Sinai. The Gemara tells us in Kedushin, like by Goyim we go after the father. By the Goyim, how do you know who's considered from what, who's a Canaanite, who's a Syrian, who's an Egyptian? You go by the father. So he says that was true up until Har Sinai. At Har Sinai, we were endowed with Kedushas Yisrael, and that's when the halachas of following the mother comes in. The Ramban we had in Parshas Emor, not that a couple of weeks ago, disagrees and says it started from the time of Avram Avinu, whether at the bris ben Absarim or some other bris, and that was the Chiddush that by Avram Avinu, as the Rambam writes as well, different levels of Kedusha, that there were the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, Avram added some mitzvahs, Yitzchak, Yaakov, each mitzvah we added a certain level of Kedushas Yisrael. But even according to the Ramban, we didn't get a full-fledged Kedushas Yisrael until Matan Torah. So whether according to the Bali Tosis, it was a full transformation from Ben Noach to Yisrael, or even according to the Ramban, we were quasi Yisrael and we became full-fledged Yisrael. Either way, we look to Har Sinai to see what has to be done for someone to become a convert. How does a non-Jew become a Jew? So the Gemara says we look at Har Sinai. So what do we look at Har Sinai? So we should get into our mountain gear. We should go up climbing a mountain, go into the desert. So there are a lot of things that happen in Har Sinai. What are the important details that have to be done to become a Jew? So that's what the Gemara spells out. There are 3 things one needs to become Jewish. 3 things if you're a male, 2 things if you're a female. One is Mila, the mitzvah of circumcision. One is Tevila, is immersion in a mikveh in certain waters. And third is Karban, bringing a Karban. So where do we see they did Mila? So actually, where did they do Mila? They actually did Mila right before Kodem Karban Pesach. The Jews did Mila in Mitzrayim. And we see that even though they did it in Mitzrayim, we see the Gemara is telling us that was considered part of the beginning of the conversion process. As we know, the time period between Pesach and Shavuot, as the Ramban calls a Cholol Shel Moed, the intermediate days, the days of Pesach and Shavuot are linked together. And the whole purpose of the Exodus from Egypt was to accept the Torah Har Sinai. So we see this even up Halacha, that the Mila, which is considered part of the conversion process, that began at Yitzias Mitzrayim, but we view that as part of the conversion having Har Sinai. Then the Gemara says we learned out they did immersion. How they learned out, the Gemara tries to quote different psukim. Whatever the source is, the conclusion is we did it at Har Sinai. And the third thing is Karbanos. So those 3 things, Mila, Tevila, and Karbanos, were done at Har Sinai. So regarding Karbanos, so we don't have Karbanos today. So if we don't have Karbanos today, so how could someone become a convert? So maybe one would think that today, since we don't have Karbanos today, you can't bring a Karban. So that the Gemara says, Lidoro Sechem. The Gemara says, no, based on a pasuk, even Bisman, when there's no Beis HaMikdash, one does not have to bring a Karban. One can become Jewish even without a Karban. In fact, there's an interesting discussion among the Rishonim. What about Bisman Beis HaMikdash Kayam? Was bringing a Karban li'ikuva nalet if you didn't bring a Karban. But certainly now everyone agrees that post Beis HaMikdash there is no Karban to be brought and everything is fine and you're a full-fledged Jew. It's an interesting discussion. The Gemara increases that what about when the third Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt? So then will all their Gerim have to bring Karbanos? So Rabbi Yochanan ben So I think it was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a gzeira that, so the Gemara says that you have to bring a Karban afterwards. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, no, we're concerned it's going to lead to a nixul, that people are going to end up using the money that was set aside for holy purposes, for kudshim, and use it for mundane purposes, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai discontinued that practice. Although the Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai discontinued it, the Rambam codifies that, but once the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, then then you do have to come and bring a carbon. So that's the whole discussion. So at that point is the ger is so that gets into the discussion. A ger that did milu tefillah and didn't do the karbanos, so is that likuvanat? That's a discussion even post Beis Hamikdash, but we assume they have the Nazarites. The fact that you can marry a Bat Yisrael now, we assume you're a full-fledged Jew, even though you might have to bring a carbon, but it doesn't affect your status as a Jew. So karbanos doesn't. It's a discussion whether it was ever likuva, but certainly now it's not. I mean, this parenthetically, the fact if it wasn't likuva, then why then you could, so someone to say that what do we need a pasuk of Dora Sechem? It must be the fact that the Gemara tells me the pasuk. I need to tell me that one has to bring that one doesn't need to bring a kabar. Mashma. If bringing a carbon wasn't likuva, then why would I need a pasuk to tell me what's the difference if I didn't bring it? I'm still Jewish. So maybe the pasuk is telling me really that that you should bring it, but if you didn't have to. Either way, that's a discussion in the Rishonim. So carbon is out; we don't have to worry about it. What about milah and tefillah? So those is the Gemara. 3 shittas in the Gemara regarding what's the story about milah and tefillah. Are milah and tefillah, are they likuva? If you don't do it, the gerus is still good. So one opinion of the Gemara is milah is mi'akev. Mi'ila is not milah, the mitzvah of circumcision is an obstacle in performing the mitzvah, performing the conversion. If you don't do milah, if you do milah and not tefillah, if you do tefillah and not milah, the milah is ma'akev, it's no good. Another opinion is tefillah is ma'akev, tefillah is the ikr. Haraya that women don't have milah. And the third opinion, the way we paskin la halacha, is that milah and tefillah are both likuv. We have, because where do we have something to pad in after because the question is because we find other mitzvahs, let's say by the mitzvah of chalitza, there's 3 parts to the mitzvah of chalitza. You have to take off the shoe, rikika, you spit on the floor in front of the yibam, and kriyas psukim, both of them read different psukim. So which one, so let's say you don't do all 3, so is it still chal? So everyone agrees the kriyas psukim, the reading part isn't likuva. It's a machlokas in the Gemara regarding the spitting. We paskin the spitting also is in likuva. However, regarding the chalitza, we paskin that the chalitza is makir. It's the same thing. That's the same question by Geirah. So carbon is certainly out for now. So regarding milah and tefillah, so we're machmir that we assume you need both milah and tefillah. So what happens then if you assume you need milah and tefillah? So one would assume then pashtis mol velo taval. If you did milah and not tefillah yet, so it's nothing. You're a guy. In fact, in terms of the seder, so the seder is you're supposed to do milah first, and then you do tefillah. And sometimes it happens, since you do milah first and not tefillah, so you have to wait a couple of days because sometimes infection or tzor are going in the water. So there's a famous shaila in the Achronim that happened, I don't know, it was 150 years ago, 200 years ago, that someone got gemalt on Thursday, whatever the case was, Wednesday, and I guess it was taking a long time to heal, and they couldn't do the tefillah until after Shabbos. So the base in Yerushalayim Paskin, he should be Machalo Shabbos, he should go and write some letters, do something that desecrates the Shabbos. I guess then word got out, and the Rav Asher, I think that was the Psak of Rav Asher Lema. I think Rav Yosef Salant was out of town, so Rav Asher Lema was the Rav, and so they asked I guess rumor got out, and they asked the base in Yerushalayim, and they said, no, he shouldn't have Mechalel Shabbos. So imagine this person must have been very confused. Welcome to Judaism. This rabbi is telling me that I don't need that I have to Mechalel Shabbos. The other one says I can't Mechalel Shabbos. So either way, so we see the Gadolus of the Binyan Tzion, the Chachmei Yishalayim sent the Shaila to the Binyan Tzion, and he writes that even though it's true, Mo Below Tavo, Ki'ilu, it's like it's nothing, one would think, nevertheless, the minig is that someone who does Mila and he didn't get to the Tefillah yet, he already could keep the Shabbos. Because normally the problem is, if you're a Jew, you're obligated in keeping Shabbos. If you're a non-Jew, you're prohibited from keeping Shabbos. So what do? Mo Below Tavo. So even though, strictly speaking, it seems to be nothing, nevertheless, the Binyan Tzion writes, the minig is that a Ger that did the Mila, not the Tefillah, keep Shabbos. What is it based on? So he says, it's based on the fact it's based on the fact that, because Kodem Matan Torah, what did the Jews do? The Jews did Mila, as we said, by the Karban Pesach. They didn't do Tefillah until Matan Torah. And we know the Jews kept Shabbos in Mara, so we see, Mo Below Tovo, you keep Shabbos. So that's a discussion among the Achronim, what was the appropriate thing to do. But we paskin either way, Mila and Tefillah are both Likuva. In order to become a full-fledged Jew, one has to do Mila and Tefillah. Maybe we'll get into next time is a major Machlokas Rishonim. So we are paskin, they both are Likuva, you have to do both. And the order is you do Mila and then Tefillah. What about it reversing the order? If one did Tefillah first and then Mila, do you need to do Tefillah again? Or did I say it works? We'll discuss. It'll be a major Machlokas Rishonim, the Ramban and the Ra'ah and others. Maybe that's what we'll get into next time.